Nice.
Hey, we're live. We are live.
We are live.
Hello, Mikey.
And what are we doing tonight? A Frothy Friday?
We got some beer.
Friday.
It's frothy.
Frothy Friday.
It's frothy
Gotta
Friday.
love it.
We got a special co-anchor here.
I
Mr.
see.
Alemonger. Hello.
I brought out the pandemic paisley. Let me get a little closer here so everyone can see.
Very nice.
Here we go. You know, I don't mess around. It's Friday night. It's formal.
It's a virus in a shirt. That's nice.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, this does a much better job than injecting pesticides and whatever. You know, I found this to be a much more pleasant way to avoid the coronavirus.
Is that
and it pairs well with narwhal shorts.
By the way, was that Better Half approved?
Of course not.
Oh, okay.
Speaking of Better Half approved,
what kind of question is
that? My backdrop, I was getting the stink eye all night.
I wonder why. Because how long would it take you to build that wall?
As I went to the bunker to go and get the cans out, and then I got why do you have these? Get rid of them.
Well, now there's a reason. This is why.
Yes.
Just mean.
You have a
so
lot.
I have so little.
Shall we tell our audience of I don't know how many?
Let's start it off.
What we got going on? So tonight we have a very special guest, Bill Covaleski, founder and brewmaster of Victory Brewing Company, has come to join us. He's going to talk us through a couple of beers and tell us what's going on with Victory and what's in the pipeline and all that fun stuff.
I think that's a perfectly wonderful idea right there.
I think it's a great idea.
I'm all in. I like stuff.
Because we actually happen to have some Victory beers here. I mean, who'd have thunk it?
I know. So let's do a quick intro. We'll bring in our guest. We need some music, though, unfortunately. Can you sing? Who can sing?
I don't think we want to do that.
A little, maybe Hotel California? I don't know.
7, 5,
I think Bill would leave the green room.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. I just hope he's enjoying his snacks. Did you do any, what were they? The holy hand grenades?
I didn't have time. I had a tough time finding just the right thickness of bacon to wrap the matzo balls.
What about some 5 Crazy Spices brisket or something?
It's a lot. I don't stop at 5 unless I'm really bored.
Okay. All right.
Twitter talk.
Speaking of bored, let's get this rolling and we'll bring Bill in. How about that?
Let's bring him in.
Excellent.
Unfortunately, I can't hear the music. There is music. Hey, we got a guest.
And there's Bill.
Hey, Bill.
I'm everywhere.
Welcome.
Happy to be here.
How were the snacks?
You know, not to complain, but there were no green M&Ms in the green room. That was a little bit surprising, but we work with it.
All right. Well, we found that they don't really pair that well with beer. They go better with whiskey.
There you go. That's the real genius of your show.
See,
You're one step ahead.
We try our best. We try our best. So we got a little mini intro for you.
I'm loving it. These levitating beers are making me thirsty.
Hey, well, that's good, and we have beer to drink.
Fortunately,
yes. So hang on a second. Let me just switch the little. Yeah, this is good.
We are the Hollywood Squares.
There you go. We don't have a center square though. That's the problem.
You stole my line.
I know. I'm sorry. Are you... So where should we begin?
Awesome.
Should we start with the beer? Should we start with the beer?
I would think so.
Where are we going to go? We're going to go with some easy ringer.
We are. I mean,
low cal. Now, full disclosure, I think the right square is not a fan of. Is not really a low cal IPA kind of guy. So your job now is to sell it.
When you speak right square.
Oh, I'm sorry, my right square.
Which square exactly are you referring to?
Talking about you, Mr. Pandemic Paisley.
Mr. Monger.
No, I think it's fair. But it's not so much I'm not a fan of the style. It's more of I think a concern with the fact that all the brewers, not to say all, but the IPAs were the first style that I recognized as following along a dynamic that I call kind of like the SUVs of craft beers.
Okay.
Porsche came out with an SUV, and when I first heard about it, why? That's not what Porsche is. And lo and behold, so many more manufacturers, they feel that now they have to have an SUV in their lineup.
Yep.
And session IPAs, when there were a few of them out there, and then Stone did one.
Yep.
And when Stone did one, I felt like, all right, there's Porsche doing a session IPA. 2-3 years later, he's got one. And I mean, they're fine. This one, and again, full disclosure, I had not had this until I just poured it. This tastes great, and that's not just because you're here. I mean, it's really a good tasting beer. That said, when I'm going for an IPA, sometimes I'm actually looking at the ABV for a reason. This is a fine beer.
Well, I think your analysis of locale IPA in the abstract is something that a lot of beer drinkers of integrity have done. Those of us who love IPAs are like, well, I don't need a locale IPA. Why would I want a locale IPA? Why does such a thing exist if I don't need it? And the fact of the matter is, if Ron and I were only brewing for exactly what we wanted to drink, that would still be home brewing. This is a commercial endeavor. We've had 24 years of satisfying a thirsty audience that has given us a ton of new opportunities. And so we recognize that there are a lot of folks that want and desire a beer like this. And I wouldn't say I was a naysayer going into it because, getting a lot of refreshment and flavor with less calories and less carbs, that's not a bad idea. That's just more pizza and cheesesteaks you can pack in. So I think that when you do look at it from the abstract, it could be like, well, why the hell do we need this thing? But a couple of sips and I think it becomes a little bit more logical.
No, I mean, actually, it does taste good. I mean, it's a good tasting beer.
No, it is.
Are we allowed to say that it's less filling and it tastes great?
I think so. I think that's
hold on a second.
Right?
It's less filling and it really does taste great.
Yeah. No one wearing anything that says Victory can say that. They can't have a brewery name and say that. So we do, back to the Victory heritage, we do have whole flower hops in this. We have Strata, which is a relatively new variety of hops, first developed or first discovered in 2009. We have Citra, we have Cascade, and we really wanted to load it up front and get a nose that tells you got an IPA, yet we wanted it to be dry and refreshing through the rest of the experience so that you could drink more of them. And I know it seems sort of funny at 10 p.m. that we're drinking a 4.3% beer, but I guess the point is, had we started at 11 a.m., we could still be drinking this 4.3% beer.
Hence the word.
I like the way this guy thinks.
It's a session. And it's a win-win. We're drinking all day, and he's, helping the company. It's good for business.
And portable, so you can drink it anywhere all day, which is nice.
Now, have you guys gone pretty much on all can lineup? It looks like you have, or mostly.
We first started canning in 2015, and the pandemic has placed a tremendous emphasis on can over bottles. Not entirely sure why, but we are running 2 canning lines pretty much constantly. One of the fortunate circumstances is we decided to transition our canning line in the Parksburg Brewery to Downingtown this year and put in a new 200 can per minute line in Parksburg. That thing arrived and was functioning on March the 24th, just as the world was changing, and this whole shift from bottles to cans was happening. So we've got 2 lines running, as I said, both in Downingtown and Parksburg.
Wow.
So the shift, the preference for cans that you've seen after when the pandemic started, the shortage or the can shortage that I've read about, is that affecting you at all, or is it on the horizon?
We got caught short on Crowlers, the 32-ounce cans, but I can tell you a story about those as well. We started selling more of them. We have a very good relationship with our manufacturer, and we go pretty long-term on the cans. There's only 2 can manufacturers in the United States. So some companies have been caught without very successful planning. Fortunately, knock on wood, we have not at this point. So I think the can situation, first of all, was started by retailers who were preparing for their customer, or were addressing their customers' sort of pantry loading, and they were essentially trying to get the most volume in the tightest footprint, smallest package. All right, so they were loading their warehouses in order to load the front of their stores in order to serve the demand. So I think it was driven by retailers first, and consumers have not complained about, you know, the lack of bottles.
Oh, they're much easier on the fridge too. They take up a lot less space. You could stack them. It's good.
Stackable.
Yeah. No, I was kind of a late convert, I think, to the craft canned beers. First, there weren't a whole lot. They weren't easy to find.
No, I mean, it was what, Oscar Blues and 21st Amendment, pretty much?
What's that?
It was Oscar Blues and 21st Amendment for the most part in the beginning?
Yeah, that's about right. And not that they were bad. I mean,
they're very good.
Breweries. But still, the overall variety wasn't really there. That's not true anymore. And there have been times over the course of the last couple of years where I'm specifically looking only for canned craft beer. And I would never have done that 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Sure.
They just make a lot. They make a lot of sense. Plus, they're easy to transport. The beers tend to stay fresher longer. That's rarely a problem for me, but you know.
You never know.
Yeah, total blockage of ultraviolet light.
Yep, no light issues. Yeah.
But I'm curious, you know, why do you look specifically for cans at times?
So sometimes it's purely for practical reasons. For instance, if it's a weekend at the beach, where I know I'm going to be spending time at our pool, it's just easier to transport. So you know, they're lighter. I don't have to worry about taking as much space with the bottles, and they are easier to surreptitiously hide in a Yeti. So in the event that there are particularly stringent no adult beverage rules, those ones tend to fit. But you know, I really started it with beach trips. We'd go to Ocean City. Just a lot easier to haul, you know, a case or two of cans out, and then bring as many as I wanted out to the beach at the time. More often now though, I am recognizing that it just makes sense sometimes to have them because they will last longer. But I'm still, you know, a big fan. And I'm not going to turn the camera around, but I have about 9,000 or 10,000 bottle caps that we continue to save.
Can you go grab it and show the audience?
I haven't been working out long enough. My gym, so I can't come up and I can't bring them over here.
Unfortunately, you know, the sound of crashing surf covers the sound of an opening can really, really well.
And yes, you can, if you time it well, you're golden all day long.
You know, but there is a downside to going to the beach with Mr. Alemonger and his bride, though. There's too much drinking, and I think the only time that our kids have gotten a sunburn under our watch was when we were drinking on the beach with them.
We weren't just drinking, however. I think there was a lot of sand sculpting and giant resort pool digging.
Yes.
Sounds like a great day. A little bit of sunburn. It's the cost.
A little bit of
price you pay.
A little bit of everything.
We lived, right? How many sunburns did we get?
Exactly. It's okay.
So, Mike, you've been pretty quiet. Any impressions about this beer?
I'm just finishing this.
It
really
goes
didn't care
down
for it at
very,
all.
very easy.
It's not very drinkable. It doesn't go down very easy or anything.
It goes down very easy.
It's awfully good. And the ABV seems like it's about right. It doesn't taste watered down.
No.
And there's still so much flavor there. So I'm amazed that it's only 96 calories. Is that what it was?
Yeah, 96 calories.
That's amazing. Yeah, I would expect this to be more
balanced. It's got great balance. It's really nice dry finish. I love dry finishes, especially in IPAs or pales or wits. I like nice dry finish, and this one has. It's nice, and it's a good looking beer also. Good
the hop combination was, it wasn't immediate. We sort of worked our way through iterations to get to it. You need to have the right, I think, for this beer. We believe that you need to have a certain oiliness to the hops because the body there's essentially no body from malt because of the fermentation process, the extra enzymes to reduce that body and reduce all the carbohydrates. So you really do need a little bit of oiliness, viscosity, contributed by the whole flower hops to make this more of the IPA that a full-bodied one would be.
It gives it more of the mouthfeel because it's got the oils as opposed to just watered down, right?
Yeah.
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 It's really good.
Yeah.
Glad you're
And
happy.
it's hoppy enough without being too hoppy, like that you're trying to mask that you didn't know what you were doing by just cramming a whole lot of hops in it. It's just a well-crafted beer.
That's a great point, and I appreciate you saying that. We have tried a few lower calorie IPAs, and we did feel that they were basically just trying to, paint, take another color of paint and paint really heavy. Because they knew the back end was no good, and they're like, well, we're just going to make the front end just so overwhelming that you're going to forget the back end.
Yep.
Yeah, just trash your palate up front.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's very, very crisp.
Right.
It's very easy drinking, and it's nice that you get a hop bite, but not super strong. This is a lane by the pool.
Yeah.
And it's the drinking it, like you said, from 11 in the morning till whenever you run out.
Right.
It's right there. I mean, it's got enough flavor to keep you interested and enough probably water to keep you hydrated. So you're good to go.
It's almost perfect for spending all day on the beach until you get sunburned, I suppose. Not that you want to do that. The comment you made, Mike, about some beers being out of balance reminded me of a very funny story from our youth. So my business partner Ron and I met when we were 10 years old, and our first career choice was to be rock stars. So like most kids born in the 60s. And one day we were torturing our guitars down in his basement, and his dad came down to essentially tell us that, enough was enough. And we were, we heard the footsteps, we turned the amps down, and he came stomping down the stairs, and he just shook his head and he said, so if you can't play well, play loud. And that sort of stuck with us even through our brewing career. It's like, we try and make beers that have subtlety, have balance, have a lot going on, rather than just be so lopsided in one direction that they shock and awe you, but they let you down elsewhere. So yeah, we joke when we drink a beer that we feel is just playing loud. It doesn't have anything to back it up.
That's a great comment. It's just plain loud.
Yeah.
So how long were you home brewing before you started, like when you said, all right, we're going to go into business?
It was the better part of 5 years. I actually learned to brew being my dad's apprentice, and he started probably in 1979 or 80, pretty much as soon as it was legal. He was from the coal regions and grew up post-Depression, lived through the Depression, and had a fairly tough existence. So that made him very resourceful. So family gardening was a way of feeding us. So pickles, sauerkraut, you name it. He created a lot of stuff for us, and he saw beer as an opportunity to create something great for him, which he deserved. And he utilized me as his assistant, and we had fun together making beer. And then when I graduated,
and drinking it.
Actually not. He drank Carling Black Label, and when he would allow me a sip from the long neck 16 ounce, I thought it was horrible. So, like usually those were summer family parties, and there was a cooler of that stuff, and there was a keg of root beer. So as a kid, one is better than the other. Who wants that nasty hoppy beer stuff? But at any rate, working with him, I just, it grew in interest. And when I graduated college in '85, I had a few idle months before finding a job where I really sort of dedicated myself to learning more about beer making. Nice. And that was the same year I gave Ron a home brewing kit as a Christmas gift.
So you're, it's, many of the, or maybe not many, but some of the successful commercial brewers now, craft brewers, haven't had the kind of classical training that you did. Like many of them seem to have gone right from home brewing right into commercial brewing. Like Sam Calgione, I guess, is a good example of that. Did you make a specific decision that you wanted to be classically trained for a year or two in order to make that jump to be a commercial brewer? Or was that just a passion of yours at the time, not necessarily a plan to move to your own brewery?
Yeah, it's a great question. I appreciate it. So Ron and I graduated college with vastly different careers in mind. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts. I started as a graphic designer, package designer, art director. So that was fine for 5 years as I was home brewing. With economics and political science degrees, he was working in financial analysis. So we came to brewing as a hobby. And then when we got more serious about it, we said, okay, let's put the other careers aside and see if this is a career for us. Owning a business wasn't necessarily the primary thing on our minds. We just wanted to get into the beer business. And then once we were in it, we started to analyze it from the perspective of maybe we could make this a living. And to do so, we felt that it was going to be important to actually have some credentials for shareholders to, invest in a company. So, I don't think our company was large from the start or overly ambitious, but we did start with a 25-barrel brew house. We did start with 144 seats on site. So we had certain capital requirements to be that production brewery we wanted to be. And I feel that our training was critical to get, friends and family shareholders to have confidence that we could actually do what we said we were going to do. So
sure, you weren't just taking a Mr. Beer and trying to open your own place.
Yeah. We sort of step by step, we got led down a path where we recognize, okay, here's the next step we have to accomplish in order to move on to the final goal. But it's a great question. And again, we went into the industry just because we were fascinated by it. Getting training abroad was a dream come true, right? I mean, who doesn't want to learn to make beer in Germany? So all of these things were fascinating. And then as we accumulated this, it was like, hey, this could actually maybe add up to a viable business.
And you timed it really well, right? That was in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
A good time. If you had the chops, it was a good time to get into the industry. Not that it isn't necessarily now, but with the explosion and the competition and the sort of got the hyper local breweries.
Oh, 1996 was
the sort of the predatory big boys out there.
Yeah, the consolidation. Yeah,
I've got to assume the risks right now to a startup are infinitely a little more challenging maybe than maybe in the 90s.
You guys just painted like the last 25 years, the picture of brewing in the last 25 years in all of 90 seconds. So that was pretty efficient. But you're right. So when Ron and I were sophomores in college, 1983, America had reached the nadir. There was 80 breweries left in the United States, and they were owned by only 50 companies. When we started writing our business plan in 1994, there were 460 breweries. So from that base, we were thinking we were a little bit late already. The year we opened, 1996, there was almost 1,100 breweries in the United States. So competition, based on a limited customer base, people didn't know what craft beer was. In essence, I mean, Sierra Nevada, Sam Adams, some guys were doing a great job of acclimating them to it, but it was a very small customer base. So it seemed like it was already crowded back then. Now, when we look at 8,400 breweries, it's sort of mind blowing. But yeah, to your point, it feels like we were essentially ahead of a pack, and we challenged ourselves to stay ahead of that pack the entire time.
Well, 96 was a hell of a year. So you've got Dogfish Head, I think, same time. Stone. Looks like Firestone Walker also started in 96.
Yeah.
Yards also?
Yards may have been 95. I think we
around the same time.
96. I think Iron Hill was 96 locally, and Flying Fish may have been 95 or 96.
Yeah, it's around that time.
So yeah, we've had some great times and relationships growing up with our peers in this area. It was pretty fertile in the Philadelphia area during that time period.
And you all seem to have weathered it, that you're all still around, which speaks to how well prepared all of you were to start the business.
And with different
haphazard.
Yeah, but weathered it with different approaches.
Yeah.
Right? with the joining up with Southern Tier versus the Stone. They seem to be trying to be truly more fiercely independent, right? Going to ward off all suitors. Whether that ultimately will be successful, who knows? I mean, they're huge now, much bigger than I ever thought they'd be.
Yeah, I mean, 2 points. Number one, Mike, thanks for giving us credit for weathering the storm, so to speak. But look in the mirror. It's thirsty customers and loyal customers like yourselves and others who may be listening in that really make the success happen because they're supporting what we're doing. And then the other thing I would say, on that point is that I've always admired the fact that craft brewers have given one another latitude to pursue their own business interests, their own models, their own recipes. I've often characterized the craft beer movement that I've known as almost like a marathon run in radial fashion, meaning the starting trigger was pulled and everybody ran down their own path. They didn't run on the same path. They all chose a different path. And that way we could admire one another's success, one another's recipes, one another's, marketing and so forth. And of course, now 8,400, it gets a little bit crowded, right? There's paths that are much closer to one another than they were back in 1996. But I think that appreciation and respect is still within our industry to admire what someone is doing and not necessarily want to duplicate it because it makes business sense.
Yeah. So could that might be a good segue into my favorite beer of all time. Okay. Which is Saison du Boeuf.
Oh, excellent. Yeah.
Absolutely. From my first sip, I said, this is an unbelievable beer. It's my desert island beer.
Wow.
And the fact that it was a collaboration between you, Stone, and Dogfish, three that you started at the same time, at a time when it seemed from an outsider or just a craft beer fan, there wasn't a whole lot of competition amongst craft brewers. It really did feel like it was just a bunch of guys and girls, although more of them now than then, I'm sure, that were aligned in a passion and weren't looking to muscle one another out, right? It really, and the fact that there were collaboration beers, they were fairly common. They still are. I don't see as many of them. Is that something? Can you talk to like your sense of where the craft brew, like how is the landscape feel to you differently, if at all, with respect to collaboration versus competition? Has the explosion in the number of brewers and maybe the effects of the large predatory macro brewers buying up so many crafts changed that dynamic, or does it still feel to you like that collaboration, that sense of spirit is still there?
Well, that question has a lot of different angles to it, and I'll try and tackle all.
And that's only my first beer. There will be many more angles later.
We're just going yes, no.
Hey, Bill. By the way, our Alemonger friend was a lawyer at one point, so just be careful.
Never on a Friday night.
It's making sense now. So, the first thing I would say is, the collaboration thing. There are so many trends that come and go in craft beer. And when they go, they don't necessarily go away forever. So it is quieter on the collaboration thing. I almost feel like it's played itself out for the moment with the audience as much as it has with the brewers. I don't think the entry of the world's largest brewers by owning formerly legitimate craft brewers has chilled the collaboration aspect of it. To some extent, I think it has given it a heightened sense of us against them, where truly independent brewers are like, all right, now we're going to show them how we stick together and how we get stuff done. I think it's the collaboration thing has sort of run out of a little bit of steam from an audience interest and a brewer interest. Well, the Saison du Boeuf was, sort of perfectly timed because the picture that Angelo had just shown was from 2003 when the three of us Sam and Greg and I had done a tasting up at a liquor store in the Boston area, and largely with Greg's energy, we had written a manifesto about Brewers United for the freedom of flavor. And we invited press to come to this tasting, and no one showed up. We had very few customers. We were just trying to sample our beer and sell some beer, but we left with a positive attitude. And as we were walking down the street and looking for a beer to drink, we came across Buff's Pub serendipitously. And so it was just so serendipitous that we kept that name in our back pocket because of Brewers United for Freedom of Flavor. And it was a number of years later when we finally sat down in order to create a collaborative beer. And it was a really fun experience. And we kept it going. We traded the recipes for a while. I'll take the heat. It was me. It was our brewery was the first one to let down because, again, we were seeing a lack of interest in collaborations. And it can come back. But that was a fun one. So the intrusion of the big breweries, I don't think has, damaged the collaborative spirit of craft beer. As I said earlier, I think it's actually helped unify us on some levels. Yet at the same time, there may be a sense of folks looking around the room to figure out like who's next and, who's going to betray us and what's going to happen here. In terms of the camaraderie of the industry, it's still very, very strong. I will say though, it's sort of like you throw a good party and you've got a bunch of people that show up who you know well. You agree on the music, you agree on the vibe, and then newcomers come to the party and maybe they didn't bring the right kind of drinks and maybe they want to listen to the music you don't want to listen to. And so as this boat of craft beer has gotten bigger and more interesting, I feel that there's new personalities that maybe aren't necessarily acclimated with other personalities. So it's just, it's getting through a transition and learning to appreciate everything that's being created and everything that can be created. But it goes through transitions. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, no, it does. I'd like to see him come back. I was always a fan. There were a handful of collabs that I would always look forward to trying, but there were few because they were usually one-off beers. Like you'd see they'd be out for a handful of weeks and then they're done. So either you were lucky and you got your hands on one or you didn't. Saison du Boeuf was one of the few because you did it. It was a handful of years, right? It wasn't a regular release, but it was more than one cycle, right?
There was an annual release for at least 4 years, and we essentially gave each brewery the opportunity to brew it that year. Because one of the big situations we had to deal with is we don't have common distribution partners. Mm-hmm. So, like if it lands in one market under under multiple names, only one wholesaler can have access to that product. Yeah. So that was the big hurdle that we had in truly making it all three labels at the same time. Sort of the culmination was when Greg had us over to Berlin and we did the imperial version of Saison du Boeuf, which he had put into the large bottles, and that it felt like we had accomplished everything at that point, right? To be brewing Saison du Boeuf with ingredients that the Reinheitsgebot would not permit in Berlin was like, okay, now what else do you do?
You've arrived. Right.
I'm gonna just let you in on a small distraction we have in the Cherry Hill studio.
Which Cherry Hill studio?
I only have one.
We have three.
Right. Oh, that's right. And then I guess we're in the central gravel bend Cherry Hill studio. Our Boston Terrier, since we've just mentioned Boston and your the collab up with Sam and Greg, has just had an encounter with a skunk.
Oh, lovely.
Which is being dealt with, probably not effectively, by other members of the household upstairs. I'm sure I'll learn how poorly they're handling this soon enough. And the home is now redolent with a particularly pungent, not very pleasant, piney, hoppy sort of
Oh,
very
What caddy?
a kind of this. It's not great, but that's okay.
Well, we won't rely on you to tell us about the aroma of the
No,
beer
please don't.
coming up.
I'll keep my nose much closer to the inside of the glass for the rest of the night.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry to hear of that unfortunate situation.
are we ready for beer number 2?
Yeah, for living in putting houses in the middle of what used to be forests.
Let me grab beer number 2.
All right,
So this one's a little more high octane, right? Or
Yeah.
Hazy Summer Love.
Hazy Summer Love.
Okay.
Yeah, we're stepping it up to 5.5% right
Hey,
now.
there you go. Which doesn't sound like much, but hey, that's 25%. So
You math guys, you're always trying to show off when
no,
we break
I'm
it.
not a math guy. I'm just I do easy math. Like, how much is the 20% tip? It's like, okay, I could do that.
I like it because it's wet.
Oh,
That's really
wait, different glass. We're going to switch to official Victory glass.
Oh, nice one. Yeah.
Fancy.
This one's from Amber Waves. Was that a benefit you guys did at the American, where was that? At the American Jewish Museum?
Yes, we did. Yep. That was in 2016. That was the final year we did that. And that was a collaborative effort where we did, we invited breweries to basically bring art and bring an amber colored beer.
Yeah.
And the idea was that if the beer looks all the same, but tastes so different from brewery to brewery, we were trying to remove the visual from the sensation. And we wanted the visual to be the art on the wall. That was a good time.
Nice.
We did that for 3 years running, and that was a collaboration with Dogfish Head as well, and other breweries that came to show their art.
Mm-hmm.
So I am still working on my Easy Ringer, and but Hazy Summer Love.
Easy went down really easy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good name for it.
The aroma is far more pleasant than what I'm combating.
So
Poor Alemonger.
Summer Hazy Love for us was an opportunity to celebrate 10 years of our most popular seasonal beer, which is Summer Love. And, at the time when it launched in 2010, this sort of hoppy golden ale was a relatively, there wasn't as many of them as there have been or have generated over time. And we just want to keep bringing new ideas, new vitality to all of the great things that we brew. And so we saw an opportunity to take something that has a great audience, has great flavor, and to bring some new aspect to it. So with the infusion of some moats in order to give it that haze that we were looking for, stretching out into some, different hopping as well. It really sort of took this beer into a slightly new direction, and just let's take something that's already popular and let's give it a protagonist. Let's mix it up a little bit, see what everybody likes. Let's give people options. Options are good.
Yeah, it smells fantastic.
So how long does it actually? Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
I'm getting so many hops on the nose. I'm a little surprised that the IBUs are only 25. You'd think it would be a little more bitter than that, but it's the Summer Love. It's it's an easy drinking beer. So.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, both of these are very lean beers in their construction, so the hops aren't really competing against too much on the malt structure. Yeah. The Hazy Summer Love obviously has a little more viscosity to it with the other components in the grist, but getting the hops, keeping the hops front and center, and getting that nice bitter dryness. I mean, definitely of the two that we're enjoying so far, Hazy Summer Love is going to be the more bitter of the two because it's coming from its father, the Summer Love, that has a nice dryness, a real firm dryness to it.
So how long does it actually take to develop? Like, who comes up with the idea? What's the development process? I mean, how long does that take? I don't know. I mean,
in an organization of our size, it takes at minimum 9 months to put something in a package, because we have a full, schedule of going through the TTB to get all the approvals on the label and such. So we build a lot of time into the schedule so that the schedule works. There's contingencies. That being said, we can go from idea to tap with something in as little as 5 weeks. But when it's a packaged product, it's a much more thoughtful process, because all of those packages have to find a home, and you can't disappoint your wholesalers with products that linger on shelves. So it is a more thoughtful process that goes behind the packaged beers. And it's been, an evolution within our brewery. I remember when we used to have the liquid creation sessions going back to the early 2000s, where we would pull people from multiple departments so that we could talk through the ideas, so that we would gain the buy-in from multiple departments, because everyone's going to have to support this in some way or another for it to get across the finish line and get on a shelf. And that was always a really fun process, because you would sometimes watch people come from various departments with like a really strident idea about what they thought something could and should be. And some of those ideas, gained air and became products that we worked on. And some of them just sort of like went down in flames. But that process was important, because people would learn like what their peers thought, what was reasonable, what was feasible. And as a group, you would move forward with the best ideas. I know that was a long roundabout answer to a simple question, but
what did you call it again? The liquid creation sessions?
Liquid creation sessions.
I like that. Yeah. I like that a lot. Is that trademarked?
Nope.
Excellent.
It's out there on the internet now.
Do you still get involved in the design of the cans from your background? Are you still actively involved in that?
Yeah, I am. In fact, I'm really proud of what our designer Bobby did with this one.
That's a pretty can.
It really is. It really is.
Pretty can.
And it's been awesome working with him for about the past 2 years. He's an amazing talent. And, the longer you get to know people, the more latitude you give them on certain things. I don't head up the design department by any means. I'm sort of the old guy in the room saying, did you think about this? And what about that? And hey, I remember when I tried this. So I give guidance at the beginning in terms of helping the team formulate the objectives of the design project. And then I sit back and, critique and add commentary in order to get it to the place that I think is going to be most successful. And it's a good place to be in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was the sole graphic designer of Victory until 2009. So,
that's a lot of hats. Wear a lot of hats, huh?
that's enough time doing that. It's good to let other people have the shot at it.
When you talked a little bit about trends or fads, whether it be with collaborations, we talked about it with collaborations. What the hazy IPA explosion? How did you embrace that or work it into your lineup at Victory? Is that something that, for instance, whether it started with the Vermont, whether it's Heady Topper or someone wanted to try and do one of these, and they tried to like figure out what is the magic behind this beer, and that may have been the sort of generalized into sort of a hazy or unfiltered IPA that now many brewers are doing. Was there something about the style that sort of spoke to you when you tasted it and said you wanted to put a Victory twist on that? Like how did you make the decision, or how did Victory generally make the decision to bring these into the lineup? And just more, I guess, personally, what is it about the hazy IPA to you that stands out? Is this something that you expect 5 years from now you're still going to have one? That's probably an unfair question, right? Because really, I guess your fans are going to help you decide whether you're going to have it in 5 years or not. So just sort of take us through that, your decision to bring the haze into IPAs for Victory.
Absolutely. Good question. And I'll sort of start with where you ended, and say that what is attractive about hazy IPAs is their differentiation from things that came before them. For me, it is that luscious mouthfeel, the fullness, the milkshake quality to them, which was so remarkably different from things that came before it, right? Unless you're talking about a super sedimented Hefeweizen. But, really, hazy IPAs came when there was nothing that had the viscosity and silky mouthfeel that they were delivering. So that's, for me, the point of difference that I find most interesting about the style. We entered into it very tentatively and very skeptically. The first hazy IPAs that we tasted, we were not fans of. Ron and I were somewhat dismissive of them. Some of them were not properly fermented. They were essentially young beers coming off of fermenters early. They were loaded with lots of yeast and particulate matter that, like, they were arriving to us essentially as flawed beers. That began to change as brewers had to ship these beers and recognize what they needed to do to make these things stable for a longer period of time. And as that began to evolve, we began to gain a little bit more respect for where their heads were at and what they were trying to accomplish. And some of the changes that came into the style in order to get shelf stability, that we could embrace that. We could embrace those changes in process in order to make something that works within our brewery, works for our palate, and something that we would be happy to put out to an audience. So as the style began to evolve to be something that was more designed to be reproduced, let's say, in a production brewery, then we saw the opportunity to do it our way, to make our improvements. This is no different than us and Hop Wallop. We avoided the Imperial IPA thing for a couple of years because we weren't tasting any that we thought were really exciting. We were dismissive of the trend. We had this very, popular and successful Hop Devil. And so we were somewhat dismissive of, Imperial IPAs until we came up with a hop combination that we thought would be differentiated and perhaps better than things that we had tasted. So, we're kind of skeptics until we see our path in order to create something that has the identity that we're interested in. And that's, I used the word dismissive a couple times. I don't mean it to be negative at all. It's not dismissive of a brewer's efforts, dismissive of the viability of a certain idea until we finally land on our vision of that idea.
It's like you said before, some of the styles initially people are just playing loud and it's not really what you're trying to do. You're trying to go and, all right, let's round this out and come up with something that's more what we want to make sustainable. We replicate it. We want to make it so we can make this every year. We want to add it to the lineup. We're not just trying for a one-off for a show. We want to do something for real.
Well,
yeah,
go ahead. I'm sorry, Bill.
I was going to say, you just don't want to jump in and do something because that's the current vogue. You want to do something that you can sense your version of it is going to be an improvement or at least differentiated from everything else that's out there.
Which has got to be it's a difficult, I imagine, a sort of a difficult challenge, but one that I guess I applaud that approach because one of the I'm a huge craft beer fan. Obviously, I've done a little more research than maybe I should have over the years.
Did we bring up your rate beer profile?
But one thing that I have been dismissive of is the fact that I see too many breweries, some that I hold in pretty high regard, seemingly copying one another, where their lineups are beginning to look a little bit too similar to one another, almost as though they're really just brewing for market share. And again, that's probably unfair of me. Again, as a fan, I'm just out there buying what I like, and sometimes buying what I think I might not like, but I want to try it. Mm-hmm. And the reality of you need to it's more than just, as you said earlier, you brewed for yourselves for so long. You still need to do that to a degree, but you also have to brew for your fans. And it's business. So maybe it's unfair of me to be critical of any craft brewer for trying to grab market share because another brewer out there is successful with a particular style. But I find too many of them also have a sameness of taste where it's difficult for me to differentiate one from another. It seems like your approach has been very different. That you're not looking to add a particular style to your lineup until you find a way to make it fit sort of a signature Victory beer, something that you would be proud to have in your lineup. It's not just, Stone is doing one, so I have to do one.
Yeah, I mean, your point about market share is, I think, a legitimate one. It is a business, but your conclusion is correct. We have to feel that the style is not something we're chasing. The style is something we're bringing new vitality to. And I'll go back to what I had said earlier about sort of the craft beer community being, a house party and getting crowded at times. I think that we evaluate one another positively or negatively in terms of what they bring to the party. And if what I'm bringing to the party is someone else's idea with a different label, it doesn't sound like a fun party I want to be at.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we've been probably following this for what, about 10, 12 years or so. But it seemed like for a while there, it was like a numbers game. Highest ABV, whether you're making an imperial or a super imperial, the highest IBUs. It was almost like
you can cram into a bottle.
Yeah, it was almost like it's like car manufacturers chasing a horsepower number or a 0 to 60 time. When the numbers really, if the finished product isn't good, you may have the fastest car in a straight line, but if you can't take a corner, or if it's stuck in the rain, then what's the point?
No one wants that. If it just rolls over, no one wants it.
Yeah, it's not good. So I mean, you're looking for, and it doesn't sound like that's your approach. Your approach is to build something that A, you like, B, is going to be sellable, and B, is something you're going to want to drink again and again.
Right. And we're not alone. I think the vast majority of brewers are looking to be differentiated and have their ideas elevated and amongst the crowd. So I don't want to say that we're different in any way, but I do appreciate the question in order to sort of walk you through what our priorities are in creating a beer. And it's funny, you mentioned the hoppiest beers, that whole sort of like race, that arms race to make the most bitter beers that happened in the early 2000s. My favorite observation on that was from my friend Garrett Oliver at the Brooklyn Brewery, when he's like, so has anyone ever went into a restaurant and sat down and said, have your chef make me the saltiest dish he possibly can? And it was a great observation of the complete folly of like, yeah, I just want it so bitter. I just make it more bitter, and then I'm going to be fulfilled.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I can't say I love bitter beers. I mean, IPAs are still generally my favorite. I found that I'm looking for a little more variety now than maybe I did 5 years ago, but IPAs are still my go-to, and I like bitter ones, but not always. That said, I've never seen the attraction of just going for the biggest, highest IBU beer. I've had a handful, few that I truly enjoy, and I've never sought out the trend of the Randalizer when Sam Calgione would bring that thing out. Thought, all right, that's like an interesting thing, but I've never enjoyed one. I don't know if I would. It just seemed like, why ruin something?
Yeah.
To use Garrett Oliver as, I guess, a good example, I wouldn't take the Randalizer of salt and just,
Sure.
empty the whole thing into the soup.
But I will say, Randall, the enamel animal, as it was originally named, was a really cool innovation because it was, it may have been aimed at just adding more hops, but the late edition hops, the cold edition hops are going to be the ones that are the floral and the flavor ones instead of the bitterness. So Sam's idea was very solid, and I've seen it actually evolve over time. I remember being at a brew pub in Shanghai in 2014, and they had this beautiful stainless steel sight glass illuminated that they packed with fruit and that they were moving their beer through, one specific beer, in order to give it a fruit overlay. And that, to me, is just something that came from Randall. It's the same concept of that late addition, that late infusion. So I thought it was, cool to see that inspiration pop up in a new place.
Like anything, it's not a bad idea. It's the execution where things fall apart. If you execute it well, that's a great idea. If you don't, that idea, not so good.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the Randalls stuffed with like Sour Patch Kids and stuff. There's some interesting things that happen.
For the kids.
Just like because we're bringing the kids in. Come have a beer.
Come on, have a beer. Have a Sour Patch. Have a gummy. Have a gummy beer.
Who's gonna bring up the seltzer?
I was waiting.
You know that has to come up. Right.
That's the 800-pound gorilla in the room, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hard seltzer.
Yeah, I mean, what do you want to hear about it?
Is that something? Is Victory looking at that at all, or is it a?
So within our family, within our portfolio of breweries, we have one that called High Current Seltzer that's coming out of our friends at Southern Tier's Brewery in Lakewood, New York. It's very nice. We've got one that is coming out of Bold Rock, which is an apple-based seltzer as well. So we have these in our portfolio, and we believe that there's audiences for them, and we believe in the integrity of these things that we're creating. There is not a Victory one at the moment. So
there's an audience for it. Because I mean, I was very dismissive of these when they started coming out. If I were to walk you into my craft beer research fridge right now, there would be a stunningly large collection of seltzers. But I'm still mostly in the research phase where I'm trying to figure out, do I really like them or not? I found a few that I'm becoming somewhat fond of. I think they have a place, and I've been surprised to see how quickly they've been adopted by so many craft brewers.
Sure. So I'll sort of put my business analyst hat on. I feel strongly that hard seltzers are the demise of conventional light beer. I just don't see 21-year-olds saying, I want beer flavored alcohol. I do see them saying, I want lime flavored alcohol. I want watermelon flavored alcohol. And that leads me to the second point why I think that where seltzers are a force to be reckoned with. My daughters are 23 and 19. They've grown up in a world of defined flavor. It wasn't a coffee. It's a caramel macchiato. It's everything has a defined flavor. There's an expectation of exactly what you're tasting. And craft beer, we'll sit here and drink the summer hazy love, and I'm smelling this earthiness from the Tettnang hop that I would categorize as a little bit of pine, but even a little bit of like fresh cauliflower. Like, okay, that kind of stuff doesn't translate well to the shelf or to the consumer.
You don't want a cauliflower beer?
So I think that the singularity of flavor definition that seltzers offer is a huge advantage to the current consumer mind for them. I think the complexity and nuance of craft beer that we love so much is becoming a liability at a certain portion of the audience.
That's a good point. Single hop IPAs. I may have missed it, so forgive me if I did. Victory has not. You never adopted the single hop.
We have in various forms, but draft. So you haven't really been seeing the single hop package releases from us. We did a series of single hop beers for well over a year called the Ranch series, where we did essentially double IPAs, single grower, single hop varietal, and those led us to what is Liberty Bell Ringer,
Okay,
and Dirt Wolf.
I love Dirt.
There were things that we learned from those that said, okay, these are new products that we can release. We've also done the same thing with our Braumeister Pils. Our Braumeister Pils is a variant of Prima Pils where we blow up the noble hops and allow for another hop to take control of that brew. But that's, again, draft only.
That was one of the questions that you mentioned before. In about 5 weeks, you can get something online, draft only. How much of that is like your experimental kind of test kitchen, where you run something out for 5 weeks, it works, do it again, or fine tune it, or try something else, as opposed to the 9-month process through TTB and everything else you're doing? Is that kind of how it starts? And then if it seems to be up to Victory standards, you move on to the next part?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mike. I appreciate it. When we were a smaller company, that's exactly how it worked. It was on the whim of, Ron and I and the brewing team to come up with things and put them on tap at our 3 tap rooms. I mean, our tap rooms are amazing opportunities to deal directly with our customers and get their insights and input on things. And we appreciate the opportunity to be able to do that with our clientele. As things have evolved, we've needed to put more thought into the whole process of what we were aiming for, because the consumers themselves have become a little bit more defined in what they're looking for. And we see certain trends. So just putting ideas out on tap and seeing what works, yeah, we can still get away with certain volumes of that. We do that. But we actually have to be we have to identify a target that we're going towards, and what is the definition of that beer. I'm not sure I answered that question as fully as you may want, but
no, that's a good answer. That's kind of what I thought goes on. You sit down and you say, we want to make Bud Light. So you roll it out, you try to make a Bud Light, and then you go,
right,
wait a minute, why did we make Bud Light? We shouldn't have done that. Let's do something else instead.
Well, that's the easiest thing for us to make, because then we can take like our classic lager and just pour like 90% tap water into it, make it taste, splashy, awful, and foul. Perfect. And then we're there.
And it'll taste just as splashy, just as awful, just as foul in 4 or 5 years. I mean, that's if there is any beauty that it's consistently bad, regardless of how fresh or old it is.
So it's shelf stable. Is that what you're saying?
Exceptionally so.
Yeah. I don't want to take swings at big manufacturers, but I have Ron and I have a great buddy who is very tuned into the reality of life, and he says McDonald's does so well because it's consistently a 4. It's not a 1. It's not a 10. It's always going to give you a 4.
Yeah.
And
everywhere you go, you know what you're getting.
Yeah.
Right? Tastes the same everywhere.
What's your take on the sort of recent emergence of craft lagers? I mean, you've always had one that I thought was really good. Like even back in, whether it was the 90s or early or thousands, you had the Victory, the V lager.
Sure.
I like that. I stayed away from lagers for years and years and years because I didn't think that necessarily a craft brewer could do it a whole lot better than the macro brewers. I've changed that opinion drastically. There are a handful out there that I think are fine beers. In summer, I think they're right up there. They're never a go-to for me, but I won't necessarily pass them by like I used to. What's is that a surprise to you? Did you see sort of craft lagers coming?
Well, first of all, I mean, the fact that, through our efforts or the efforts of various craft brewers that we've got you to appreciate lagers, craft lagers, that feels like a win. So that's good news. We placed a lot of faith in lagers, to be honest with you. When you look at our business plan, it was two guys who went abroad to learn how to make German beers. And our idea, our concept of Victory was to essentially win at import quality beers in America, because we knew we could beat the actual imports on freshness because of the travails of shipping. And so our business plan was really sort of predicated on winning at a golden lager, our Oktoberfest lager, the Victory Fest beer that's still in our portfolio, and our Hop Devil, which was the third thing that we had on tap when we opened in February of 1996, was kind of like, that was the very hopeful idea that maybe might find an audience. But otherwise, we really thought that we were going to butter our bread with European lagers. And to a large extent, on site in our tap room in Downingtown, we did for a number of years, because we had to acclimate people to what a high quality beer tasted like that was made fresh and was somewhat familiar to what they had enjoyed as well. I mean, even the Summer Love, which is not a lager, one of the mental tricks I think we employed in making this is it's got a relatively high degree of Tettnanger hops, which is fairly common in classic lagers. It's sort of a baseline hop flavor. And it can be a really expressive hop that we love to begin with. I don't want to sort of dismiss it to being, general and generic, but we've got a fair amount of it in this. And I think that it provides a certain level of familiarity of this golden ale that is almost lager-like for customers.
So
Well,
on the
that makes
nose,
sense, right?
on the nose, people remember it, and then you get the Victory spin on flavor, which kicks it up a whole other notch. So that makes great sense.
It's a very deep familiarity we're going for.
Yeah.
It's like something that's in the back of your head, and you're just like, yeah, I like that. I know I like that. I've had that before.
Hey, Bill, one question for you, and this is like a very rookie question, but Mike and I do reviews quite a bit, and then we'll have a porter, we'll have a stout. What's the real difference between the two?
Oh, I wish I knew exactly. So I think the original Guinness was considered a stout porter, is what I understand.
Sure, confuse me more.
And then over time, the Guinness brewery started moving along a path where they thought there was more identity to their porter than what the current paradigm was. So they decided to call it a stout. They came from the same family. They lived in the same household, and then they went out on their own and became their own things.
Is it like the distinction between like a Pilsner and a lager? I mean, they're both lagers technically, right?
It's not like that, because they're more distinctive. So lager is, when you look at the tree of beer, you've got two main branches, ale and lager. Pilsner is a part of lager. That's where it stays. So there's various forms of lager. Alemonger and I were just talking about, the V lager. So we have a beer in our portfolio right now called Classic Lager. A year ago, it was called Helles Lager.
Thank you
6
for
years
doing
ago.
that.
It was Victory Lager, V Lager.
Yeah.
We basically have had this delicious Helles Lager in our portfolio forever, and we keep tweaking the name, hoping that the vision that Alemonger has of the second coming of craft lagers is going to happen. We've just figured, we'll keep tweaking the package, and we'll get there.
Well, it didn't work on me because I bought both.
And he swore they were different.
So you didn't get a new customer in me when you changed the packaging to classic. I bought it anyway. It was very good beer. In fact, about 2 weeks ago, I did my research on a 6-pack at the pool.
Excellent. Good to hear. Yeah, no, that one, I mean, we plow through a ton of volume of it. When I say we, it's collectively the brewers. That's a great beer. It's a good get-together beer.
It's a great summer beer. Mentioning stouts, though, that brings up a mild sore spot, and I'm not going to blame you or Victory for it, but years ago, when it was harder to get your hands on West Coast beers, distribution was a little more difficult. I may or may not have sent boxes, carefully wrapped and packaged boxes of hot sauces to craft beer fans on the West Coast, and even a couple in Alaska. There was one beer that they kept asking me to get, which was your Storm King. They couldn't get their hands on it. So to large regions of the country, Storm King was an ungettable, it was sort of one of these mythical beers. We could occasionally get it, not as often as we wanted to. But when the season was right, I knew I could go out and I could pick up Storm King and I would send it out. Unfortunately, one of those shipments of hot sauces didn't quite make it because it was dropped by, I don't know, it was FedEx or whoever, and I got a little nasty gram from something about, shipping alcohol and violating some policy of theirs, and ended up not going well for me.
Rules.
Ted, that's not an issue right now because you're distributing pretty liberally, right? You're in 31 states?
35 states. Though with 8,400 breweries, we are getting chased to some extent out of some places as well. It's not the same audience we're serving. And I do appreciate the fact that you were trying to help your friends who are hot sauce aficionados in Alaska. I mean, if I was a hot sauce aficionado in Alaska, I would want a Storm King too. That's a great beer. But that beer was the #1 rated beer in the country in the summer of 2003 by Rate Beer and Beer Advocate Standards, and now we can't even find an audience for it. So that tells you of the dramatic changes that have happened in craft beer, and I don't lament that. It's simply the evolution of the consumer, the evolution of the marketplace. It is what it is.
It's like fashion. Those old jeans from the 70s, they'll come back. Bell bottoms are coming back.
There's an audience for it in this house.
There's an audience in this house for it.
My wife is still a massive fan of Storm King, and in winter, if there's any one beer that she asks me to pick up, it is Storm King. And if I can't find it, and I come back with something which I know to be a credible substitute, whether it be a Sierra Nevada Narwhal or
Rasputin,
I know, or a Rasputin. I was like, this is a very good imperial stout. I get like the stink eye. I shouldn't use that word now because this whole house is stink eye.
Every eye has been stung.
It's a wonderful beer.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And it's funny because even though I say we can't find an audience for it, it won't die. We keep finding enough consumers coming out of the woodwork to say, hey, bring it back. And it's, it keeps popping up on the production schedule in draft form because it has a very loyal audience.
Yeah, and from October to March, that's a great beer.
Yeah.
A nice solid beer. You want the summer love as we move into warmer weather, but it's just a great beer.
There was a brief period of time where the Storm King was no longer offered on the hand pumps when we were doing that in our Downingtown brew pub, because this is early on in Victory, because there were like 2 nights where Ron and I were so seduced by the Storm King that like after the second Imperial pint, we had to call home and say, all right, we're not coming home for a little while. We're going to finish some work. We're going to drink some water. And it was one of those things where like the temptation of having that beer on hand pump was so strong. We're like, no, that one can't be on hand pump. And it only really took like, 2 times to say, all right, this thing is more powerful than I.
See, but now with Uber, you could bring it back again, and you don't have to worry about that.
Great
They'll still
point.
take you home.
Great point.
Drink responsibly. That was just a joke.
Of course.
So what's next? What's the new thing? What are you going to come up with as your next big beer?
Boy, we're not tweaking the lineup too much in 2021. Wow. Shocks me to even use that term.
Let's say it because we don't want to hear 2020 anymore. This year has to end.
Will there be a big 25th anniversary beer or something coming up for you guys?
The thing that we're sort of focusing on for our 25th anniversary is that we're going to be able to open up a tap room in Philadelphia. We do have some beer ideas to go along with that, of course. But
although we have to be able to get into the tap room.
Yeah, virtual tap rooms don't help me.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you have a location already, or?
Oh yeah. So you're gonna love this. 1776 Ben Franklin Parkway.
Oh, look at that.
Do you recall the old TGI Fridays?
Yes.
Yes.
That's
I
it.
had one of the
Well, that's
worst
where you're going to go. Oh, wow.
How did you land that? That's a jackpot right there.
Yeah, it's funny. So Gary, our executive vice president of retail operations, was able to pull that one off, and it was one of a number of different locations we were looking at. That's an interesting corridor. I mean, from a restaurant standpoint, it hasn't necessarily been a restaurant hotbed, but it's got a community around it, both residential and business, that we feel could really gravitate towards our brand. And also it puts us on a corridor where we're going to see more tourists, and we do appreciate the opportunity to sort of welcome tourists to Philadelphia and give them an experience that's a victory experience, let's just say.
And there's a rooftop deck. So
there's a rooftop deck.
You can actually see the parkway and the other buildings around it. It's very nice.
And there was a pool on that rooftop deck that we discovered, which won't be there.
I don't think you want that.
That is wasted space for a brew pub. Might be fun to look at, but you're not going to make much use out of that.
So that's kind of the big victory focus for 2021, which, as you point out, will be our 25th anniversary.
Kudos.
Which is making me feel incredibly old.
Don't we all? What so what in your years since you started, what have you truly not seen coming? I mean, has there been, whether it be a trend for a type of beer, a business shift, something? I mean, have you truly been surprised? Was there a morning where you woke up and you said, I just didn't see that coming, good, bad, or otherwise?
That's a really good question. There's probably a number of things that would fit into that bucket quite easily. The one thing that I find interesting, and I think I alluded to it in different ways earlier, is, Ron and I got the education that we got and put the steps in place because we wanted to create a business that was viable, right? Based on conventional terms. The thing that I'm getting at here is that craft brewing has become a lifestyle choice for a lot of entrepreneurs, and God bless them. There are people who are infusing their communities, employing people and doing things on a very small scale, but the model that they're deploying doesn't actually seem like it is a true business model. It's more of like, this is a hobby. It's going to have a certain economic turn to it. And that is sort of a perversion of business, and not in a bad way. It's just so unexpected for folks who built a business methodically and did things in conventional terms, let's say. So maybe it's us who have the old idea, and maybe the new idea is actually the paradigm that is going to be the winning paradigm. But at the same time, I see some of these, operations, and they don't look like they're intentional and built for the future. And that's surprising and on some level upsetting, because I really want everyone who chooses this as a lifestyle and as a brewer to have a fair shot at, success that they deserve.
No, but for on the other side of that, is there a concern that you have that those that are getting into it for hobby reasons, that may somehow water down the perception of true quality craft beer that you have worked so hard to achieve, and this goes back maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago when the big predatory, I keep calling them predatory macro brewers, I think they were first dismissive of you and other craft brewers as they were kind of too small to really worry about. And as their market share began to increase, they realized they needed to deal with it somehow. And one of their strategies, I think, which ultimately it failed, was to sort of make their own, I call them fake craft beers. They brewed them, they canned them, they bottled them. They were all horrible. And they failed, which was cool. I was happy to see them fail, but I have to imagine that was partly a concern for you and the legitimate commercial successful craft brewers, because it had a tendency maybe to sort of lower the expectation of some of the newer potential craft beer clients.
Those are very good observations. I mean, I've been a professional in this for 29 years, so I've seen a lot of turns of the wheel and come to expect a lot of things. I will state clearly that I don't feel I have any primary ownership over this that others don't have an opportunity to share in. And I think that's part of my concern, is that I want this business to be as inclusive as possible for all models and all people. Unfortunately, I see some models out there that concern me that they're not durable, they're not built well, and I think that they run the risk of potentially giving customers an experience that isn't up to the standard that our industry should really hold ourselves to. It's a crowded situation now. Let's just say that.
Right, and that's a worry. I mean, you're big enough now. You have enough of a following, certainly regionally, that maybe you don't have to worry as much about sort of the less experienced or less seriously focused new craft growers.
Yeah, but as the former president of the Brewers of Pennsylvania Trade Association, I do. I worry for everyone. I worry about the integrity of our industry, and I want to pull this conversation back to a positive place, but there's clearly a lot of potential for worry. Let's just say that.
Sure. What about potential for growth? I mean, obviously it's exploded. I mean, craft, you look at it now, 20 years ago, I have to imagine you would be amazed, right? You couldn't look into a crystal ball and say in 20 years,
Sure,
there's going to be this many craft brewers.
8,400 brewers, right?
Right. And there's been talk about the bubble, whether the bubble bursts, it's going to contract, and then it seems to expand again. Is there more room? And let's take the pandemic out of it, because of course that's a monkey wrench that
Everybody's dealing with.
Addressed. But is there more room for even further expansion? Can you even look out there and see what's next?
I can't predict to any great degree. I'm just an observer, but I will say something that sounds like, conversely opposed to what I just said, in that I do see that servicing local communities with a place that of integrity, with high quality products, there's lots of places to plug into still geographically. So I do feel confident about craft beer finding homes in lots of places. I just, again, worry about that some of them not necessarily being built to last.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Do you consider the built to last from both a capital point of view and a vision, or more from vision than anything else?
Probably vision, because vision is going to make you make the right capital decisions, right?
Worst beer you've ever brewed. Okay, I'll right there. It has. Have you ever? And maybe not one that made it commercially.
Right.
Looked good on the drawing board. Had enough, had enough steam to get far, and then at some point you had to pull a plug before the rest of us had a chance at it. Has that happened?
I'll answer your first question first. I said I was trying to get this conversation to a more encouraging situation. Now you bring up worst beers ever. I'm just going to go on record, point to that guy.
It's the Alemonger. He drags.
Wait, should I put him in the green room? Is that what you're saying?
No.
I can put him in the green room.
It wasn't that egregious. No.
Wait, hold on. He's got to check the inventory.
He's out.
He's out.
There you go.
He's back. Are there any M&Ms left?
Whoa, I don't know where I am.
So actually, two worst beers that were very memorable. As soon as you asked that question, one was a Pearl Lager, drank in probably Houston, Texas, in 1983. It just was insipid. Insipid would be like
that would be this. That would be this one. That would be this one.
That would be this
Pearl Lager beer right there.
It just had all these lager beer flaws. I mean, there was like somewhere lingering diesel qualities in it. It was not well made. And I had almost the identical experience with an Emu lager in Australia in probably 92. Was the name of the brewery. And it was
that's the brewer? Emu,
yeah.
Oh,
so
it had a little too much emu in it. Is that the problem? It was too emu. If it had less emu, it would have been better.
I think it was dry emu.
A beer after a flightless bird. I think that's a problem right there.
Right. They should have just gone for it and called it Dodo. But no, those two were memorable. They were spectacularly failed lagers from my perspective at that time, and it gets us back to the lager conversation, because a well-made lager is not an easy thing to pull off, and a poorly made one can be dramatic and
can be memorable.
Yeah. Thanks for the memories. Was there anything? I guess the other question was there anything that we had done that was just like, no, this can't fly? Not really. Oddly enough, we did have a situation early on where we were getting yeast from our friends at Old Dominion, where Ron had brewed, and we got what we thought was a Weizen beer strain, and we brewed a Weizenbock, and it was not fermenting as expected to the characteristics of that yeast strain normally. This is probably 1997, and but the beer off the tank wasn't tasting bad. It wasn't tasting like what it should be. And then they informed us like, oh no, we unfortunately gave you the wrong thing. You got a lager strain. So we fermented, essentially we fermented warm. So we had almost like a Weizen steam beer. And it ended up going on tap and being enjoyed by all of us as the X-Bock, because of the yeast screw up. But it was flawed in that it wasn't what we envisioned, but it was flawed because one ingredient wasn't the ingredient we thought we had. And it had its own unique characteristic that we were happy with, but it wasn't what it was intended to be. And I
love steam beers. There's so few of them out there.
So a Weizen steam Bock.
Interesting. Can't imagine that one coming back. That you're not looking. That's not going to be the 25th anniversary.
Yeah.
Coming to the tap room near you.
Yeah, X-Bach is, a one and done, I think.
Desert Island beer. I mentioned mine. It's I signed above. So if you to pick one of your beers, whether it's a current production or past production, then that's all you got an unending supply on tap. Do you have a particular favorite, or is that such an unfair question that I have to withdraw it?
No, it's fair. I sighed and stared at the heavens briefly because there's a bit of a conflict. You had brought up Storm King Stout, which would, that could be the one, because it's so close to my true love, which is Prima Pils. Prima Pils for me just delivers so much refreshment, so much flavor, relatively low ABV. It's the complete package.
Yeah.
And interesting, isn't it, that you could love both of those, and on the spectrum of craft beers, it's hard to find two that are any further apart.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. No, they're beautiful beers, both of them.
Well, unless you said like a Goza and the Storm King.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the opposite end of the spectrum.
Goza and Storm King, yeah, that's way off.
When will Gozas go away? Do you think we're nearing the end of that trend, or is that here to stay?
Similar to collabs, it's it's starting to move out of fashion, vogue, it seems, but I think that there's a place for a nice tart beer. They're very refreshing. And I will say that, when I was going to school in Germany in 1993, if you told me that I would be able to brew a Goza for an American audience and they would appreciate it, I would say you were out of your mind. It's never going to happen. Right. And that's what I think is so wonderful about what your show and what we as brewers have created is there's an appreciative and educated audience that has given us opportunities to do things that, when you asked the question was what was unexpected, this could have been my answer. The fact that the audience was so educated and so prepared to give us latitude to do amazing things.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the Kirsch Goza. That was a fun one. Is that pretty much out of the lineup, or?
Out of the lineup, but we don't burn the recipes, so
right.
I can't tell you the future, but it may not be too far out on the horizon.
Okay.
Now, it's out of the lineup for packaging, but might you bring some of these back to the brew pubs?
So yeah, so in our tap rooms, we'll actually do what we call our throwback tap, and we'll revive a recipe and we'll put it on draft for customers. And we wish we could reward a larger audience with that. But again, some of these things have shown that they don't have the traction to be relevant to that larger audience.
I'm going to guess the grapefruit agave might not find its way back into bottles. I love that.
I love that one too. And actually,
that was one of the few beers that I tend not to buy in bulk. I'll get, maybe a 6-pack here or there. That was one I should have purchased a couple cases of.
Okay.
It was very good, but I could recognize that it probably doesn't have a giant audience.
It was, again, a moment when beers like that were, resonating with an audience, and then the audience sort of moved on to hazy.
And you thought to yourself, I'll make a hard Fresca, because that's really the audience. They take a good grapefruit set, will make them hard.
I enjoy a good soft Fresca, actually. How frustrating is that frustrating to you as a brewer? This sort of fickleness that, you've done such a great job. And whether, when I say you, I'm talking about like the better craft brewers and introducing new flavors, new opportunities, sort of new horizons to craft beer drinkers. But is it frustrating that sometimes it seems that the tastes are so fickle that it almost seems year to year, season to season, the too many people are looking for what's next? How do you handle that?
It's only frustrating when you have a practical problem, when you have, a wholesaler or a market that has too much of a beer that didn't hit the mark, didn't find an audience. that's when you have a real problem to solve with that business partner, and that's when it becomes frustrating. I have very thick skin from 24 years of operating a brewery, so I don't take personal offense at what people like or don't like. So the notion of being frustrated is really only when it's a very practical frustration. I feel it's our job to give our customers something they want more of.
Sure.
I mean, so it's funny though. I will also give you that we've stopped using the word fickle. We just use the word promiscuous.
Well, it's funny because
really
I do like that better.
That's really what's going on here.
I mean, we're all married. We have one wife, but with beer, we don't have to commit.
Right.
I don't know if we all be after tonight, because I still haven't figured out what has happened with that dog and the skunk. So
the skunk might be in the house. Is that what you're afraid of?
let's see. There's a reason why I have my research has gone on to the second hazy summer love.
That's funny.
And I may not stop here. We'll see.
Well, I don't have. Oh, actually, I do have. I don't know if you guys indulged in this one when it was in the marketplace.
I have indeed.
I have not tried that yet.
I will tell you, like,
can find it.
First sips, it's available at Wegmans. I thought yesterday.
Huh.
First sip, first half can didn't do it for me.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of the pint, I was a fan.
Cool.
It's so was that more of a taste thing, or did it need to warm up a little bit for you?
I don't know. I think it might have been. I might have. My expectations was it would be closer to a traditional IPA with a little tartness.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just a little more. The tartness and the bold flavor was more forward. But then as I accepted that more, I began to like it, and now it's
well, it's like that beer you gave me a couple weeks ago. What was it? It was the Lawson's.
That Lawson's
passion fruit.
Yeah, I forgot what they called it.
Was it a passion fruit IPA?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the first couple sips were a little tough, but then once you adjust to the flavor, so that's the hard part about reviewing. Like, a lot of times it's a first impression. So I may not like it the first time around, but then you go back to it and it's like, oh, maybe I wasn't, you just got to give it a little time. Yeah. You have to adjust to the flavor.
So what was your thinking, Bill? What was your thinking behind that? Like who came to you and said, let's do a sour IPA? Where did that come from?
It's actually something that we've been working with for a while. We had the Juice Boost last year, which was a sour IPA. Obviously, there's two trends, and we like to construct things. We like to build new things out of stuff, paths that exist. This one, I've really plowed through a lot of this beer over the late winter into the spring, because to me, this was an incredibly good expression of how sourness and hop flavor can find their own harmony within the orchestra of flavors. I really felt proud of how we constructed this. The team was able to harmonize those two disparate elements. And I agree with you. It does start off, tart. It promises to be sour. But I do find that the hops sneak in just behind the sourness and then start evolving on your palate in a very sneaky way, because the two are really, locked together.
That's exactly what my experience was. That's cool. Exactly right. Mm-hmm. And
it's another really cool can from Bobby.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the can thinking, oh, I wish I had that one.
Yeah.
It's so shiny.
Yeah, sorry, we're not here to create envy. I apologize.
Yeah.
Pretty shiny packages.
Bill, you're a whiskey drinker, am I correct?
Yeah, I have a few bottles in the cellar. I enjoy it from time to time. And actually, before I get to your question, which I do want to hear, I had a question for you guys, and that is, we talked about just a moment ago how, like, you know, your first beer, you may not have gotten full appreciation out of it, but your second beer you did. Beer is a volume thing, whereas whiskey and other libations aren't. Do you, as you analyze these products, take that into consideration?
I definitely do with beers, without question. I mean, there are some that'll hit me right away. Like at first couple sips, I know I will know whether I love it or not, and I'll know whether I may hate it. But that's still relatively rare.
Okay.
Most of them, you know, I recognize might take a little more time, and it's especially when it's something more bold. That, you know, heavy drop, you know, sour heavy drop is a perfect example of it. That it's one that I knew I thought I would like. First couple sips, wasn't so sure about, but it evolved, and ended up really, really enjoying it.
Got it.
Yeah, for me, it's like, I think like when you try a new style and you're not familiar with it, you know, you just kind of have to adjust to it. Like that first Goza you have, it's like, oh my God, I just bit into a lemon, you know. But then you get the right one, you know, where it maybe has a little more balance, where there's a little bit of sweetness to offset all the sour, you know, or whatever the case may be, and you kind of adjust to it and you learn to appreciate it. You know, like my first IPA, I was like, what the hell is that? But then, you know, you find a good one, or maybe you go back to that one that was kind of a little, not off-putting, but just unusual. You're just not used to the flavor.
Well, and that's an interesting concept, because then it becomes almost like a recovery thing. Your first one is so startling that it like, okay, there must be something wrong with that. Yeah. And then you have your next one, and it's proves that the first one wasn't, you know, bad, but it's better than the first one. And then you acclimate yourself to like this new paradigm of flavor.
Well, they say you should try things, 3 times, like with little kids, when you have children. Like they try it the first time, they're going to hate it. Maybe they try the second. You have to give it a couple tries, because, you know, you hate to say, you know, what's the cliche, acquired taste, but it's true. I think it's a true thing, because you may just, it's something you've never had before. You know, like Mike, for instance. He would never drink a peated whiskey.
I'm an acquired taste. People don't like me the first couple of times. Oh wait, no, you're going a different way with that.
No. Like peated whiskey. You know, going back to the whiskey thing.
Peated whiskey, heavily hopped beers. You know, same thing.
Right.
The big thing for me is the temperature when I try something. That if it's too cold, I just don't get it.
It's numb, and you don't really taste anything.
And the flavor wasn't what I wanted. So I'll let a lot of beers sit to almost get warm and see how it changed over the time, because it opens up a lot more flavor to me.
Yeah, that's logical to me.
And I'm more of a stout drinker, where they're almost warm to begin with. They're better warm. So the cold doesn't, the fact that it's not chilled, it really doesn't bother me that much.
Yeah.
So I'd rather try something over a longer time horizon to see if I actually get what they were trying to do. And the other part is there are certain styles that I know I'm not going to like a Goza, something that's heavily tart. It's just not a flavor profile for me. So I'll temper my expectation based on how little I'll like that flavor profile, and then be pleasantly surprised when I find something that's really well crafted within that style.
Makes total sense. So I will tell you, leading into Angela's question, that I'm in your camp, Mike. I am not a peated whiskey guy. The phenolics for me, I can appreciate them. I can appreciate the salinity. A little goes an awfully long way with me.
I liken it to the people who really like overly hopped beer, where you're drinking it on a dare. You can't really like that.
Well, going back to that, going back to the numbers game. You know, going back to the numbers game we were talking about before, like, you know, with the IBUs and the ABV, and, you know, with peated whiskey, it was not always, you know, you learn that it's the ppm, you know, the parts per million on the phenols. But, you know, if you have, like, what's the one, the Bruichladdich, what's that one, Mike? Yeah, the Octomore. And they, you know, progressively increase the phenols. But, you know, when you taste it, though, you know, you kind of get past the smoke, and there's really more to it. You know, it's like they put the number on there to maybe attract attention, kind of like horsepower on a car or IBUs on a beer. But you really got to kind of give it some time and experience it to figure out really what's going on.
And as long as it's well crafted,
right?
it does what it's supposed to do.
It's like not just smoke for the
like
sake of smoke.
great.
Or,
I'm just drinking a bottle of charcoal. I'm not really happy about that.
Right. So whether it's just you can't just have alcohol for the sake of alcohol, or bitterness units for the sake of bitterness. There has to be something there, like you were saying about the salt. Yeah. No one wants the saltiest dish on the
bring me the saltiest thing you can make.
Right. Now, if you want a salted pretzel and you're going to drink some beer with it, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, for me, it really is, the phenols itself. I'm a fan of smoked foods. I'm a fan of, smoke and various characteristics. When I get that electrical fire Band-Aid quality in my liquid, just doesn't make me happy.
And it's funny you say that, because we've had a couple of whiskeys lately with our tastings that have like a mesquite or like a hickory flavor to them, which if you're a barbecue fan, you're like, boy, these whiskeys are really good because they've gone beyond just the charcoaly peat, just, ash flavor to it.
I was enjoying your analysis of those flavors in that product on that episode earlier this week.
It's good fun. It's good fun. Speaking of that, have you guys ever made a Rauch beer?
We have, and we would love to do so again. I just told you that I'm not a fan of phenols, but one of the really cool oddball beers we did one time was we did a Belgian Dubbel with smoked malt, because Ron and I recognized how some of these Belgian yeasts have very phenolic overtones in fermentation. And so we did something called Otto, and Otto was a Rauch double, and it was delicious. It was exactly what we wanted it to be. And it was a 750 release, probably back in 2007, 2006.
Okay.
Wow. Time flies.
How about you're no longer doing the Baltic porters?
No.
Yeah, that's another one I was a big fan of. I was a big fan of that.
Is it because it didn't sell, or just? No, I don't know. I'm sure there's business considerations here. So
I chuckled because it was funny when our good friend Tom Baker of Earth Brewery and Bakery closed his heavyweight brewery. Tom and Peggy closed that brewery. We were so sad.
They did Percuno's Hammer, right?
Yeah, we were so sad to see Percuno's Hammer go, and we worked with them in order to sort of revive Percuno's Hammer in our own form, in our own inspired form, and that's where our own Baltic Thunder came out of. And it just, similar to their experience, it just didn't find an audience. It found a small audience. I always brought it to beer dinners because it was such a food-friendly beer in the later courses, and everybody loved it. But then, at the liquor store 5 miles away from where we were doing the beer dinner, it would sit on the shelf and collect dust.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. And that's a good observation. I hadn't thought, but it's a wonderful beer to pair with food, and right as later into the meals, into desserts. I mean, that I love that, and it was only fortunate to have, I guess, their Percuno's Hammer. I guess once. It was probably the year that they folded, and then it was a couple years after that you did the Baltic Porter, the Thunder.
Yeah, it wasn't immediately after their closure. It was, there was a transition there. And then, I don't know if you had it, but we also did a red wine barrel aged version of it, 2 years. And that was the Red Thunder. I think I've got like 2 bottles left in my cellar, and that one has a spot in my heart. That one's really cool because, the red wine tannins add an interesting overlay to a very soft and malty beer.
How long ago did you do that?
Red Thunder?
Yeah.
The last version of it, I would say, probably was 2009.
So how long has it been in the basement? 11 years?
Yeah.
How was it? How many did you sock away?
Initially, I probably squirreled away 2 cases initially. I have a weird beer cellar. I have more than I probably should have. I've drank beers that are well past their prime.
Uh-huh.
And the only reason I can defend myself on that is I have a brewer's curiosity in knowing what happens beyond the horizon it was intended for.
Right.
I want to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
How has it evolved over the years? I mean, how often do you go down and crack one open? Is it like a annual ritual, or?
Well, now that I'm down to like 2 of them, now it gets really weird because it's like, what's the occasion you want to like drink that thing?
How about the next one should be the end of this pandemic, whenever that is.
There you go.
If I could end the pandemic and kill the virus by drinking one of them right now, I would drink both.
Yeah.
Of them, just to ensure that.
I know you had mentioned earlier, that the issues with respect to the pandemic and COVID, or you kind of talked out of that, but there have to be some sort of bright spots. Like what have you observed, whether it be about the clientele, or anything about the craft brewing experience, that has been really sort of a pleasant surprise, a bump, a win. We're all looking for something happy about this. What have you seen at Victory that you think is it's hard to find a true positive out of all this? Where are the bright spots?
There are a couple, actually. It's a good question. I'm amazed by the creativity of the team that we've empowered to observe situations, observe conditions, and make good business decisions to move forward. One of which was, we had a ton of kegged beer on March the 19th, which might never find an audience. What do you do? It was beer that you put your heart and soul into. So our team at our 3 tap rooms came up with a plan to put all of that into 32-ounce crowlers and blow them out literally at 3 for $10. And so we created an online portal, and we were basically giving folks the comfort they would normally come to our locations for in their own home. They could get 3 beers, they could get a bunch of those 3 beers, they could enjoy them safely at home, and we gave them a safe connection point to just come back and wave to us as they picked them up curbside. And that was very important because it maintained a connection and it provided something of comfort that our audience would have to search for otherwise. The other really cool thing that we did here in Pennsylvania was Southern Tier is also a distiller. And so he had been working to get Southern Tier distilled spirits into our tap rooms. And we had done so just a year ago in terms of cocktails and such, because we know we have a very promiscuous audience, right? There's lots of different things they like to enjoy. The liquor stores in Pennsylvania closed down. And so by April the 8th, we were able to move through all of the hurdles we needed to become a fulfillment center for the bottled products, the canned cocktails, and the vodka seltzers from our partners at Southern Tier. And we became a fulfillment center for those purchases online. And it was a tremendous amount of business generated because people were in need of things like that. So that was something I was very proud of our team in order to figure this thing out and accelerate the path in order to get this stuff in customers' hands in a time of need. And I don't want to sound entirely altruistic. It's not a public service we're creating, but when the liquor stores are shut down, there's options are needed. So we did that. That was very exciting. And in terms of reopening our tap rooms, there's some really cool things we've been able to do. We did a survey initiated on May the 6th with 20 questions to see what was in our customers' heads. What would it take to welcome them back? What were their safety concerns? And we got initially 5,200 responses. We're now up to 7,000 responses.
Wow.
And I don't think that kind of response rate would happen under normal circumstances. So that was well timed. People had a voice, they had concerns, they wanted to come back, they wanted to enjoy the things that they had appreciated before, and they were willing to share with us what they wanted to do. And in all of our tap rooms across all of our artisanal brewing venture properties, all 9 tap rooms, we've actually installed a system in the heating, air conditioning, and ventilation that is it's a bipolar ionization process. So it doesn't create ozone in the ionization process, but what it does is it aggregates all of the, well, not all, but the majority of particles like viruses and bacteria, and makes them much more easily captured in the filtration, and renders them neutral by taking out hydrogen ions from the cells themselves. So it's a very effective neutralization process that we've put into play in all of our tap rooms. And so that's a public health thing that we could have done, who knows, any time ago. But when we listened to our customers, that was something that we decided was appropriate to act on immediately.
So what I'm hearing is, when I go back to Philly for work, I should just go to your new tap room up the street, because
can we get free
for
Wi-Fi?
my own personal health, the air quality there will be enough to keep me alive.
You should work from that facility.
And if I do an 8 or 10 hour day, because I'm a hard worker, I should just do it there. Okay.
Can we pay for our space with beer? We'll just buy beer and you'll give us free Wi-Fi. How about that?
That makes total sense. And of course, any viruses that fall into your alcoholic beverage,
kill it,
neutralize.
There you go.
Now, was there any thought prior to? I mean, it's hard to even think about expansion now, given all the realities and the challenges. Prior to the current pandemic situation, any thought to expanding west? We've seen like a lot of the East Coast or the West Coast brewers come east. Some with more success than others, with brewing facilities on the East Coast or the Southeast. Had you ever thought of setting up operations west, or are you comfortable regionally, your Pennsylvania, as far as an actual brewing operation?
It's a great question, and actually a bad time to speculate, because I think that there will be market opportunities that will become obvious in the near future. We don't have a burning desire to have this national footprint of Victory. We do have an interest in deploying all of the great portfolio partners in ABV in appropriate places geographically. So it's hard to speculate on that one. I mean, the whole context of what is the right rates for retail leases right now is all up in the air. So I think there's a lot of things that can't be sorted out and speculated on right now.
You mentioned rolling out your business partners in ABV and in your tap rooms.
Mm-hmm.
Are you exclusively just your brand, or will you have some things from Six Point or Southern Tier or from the cider guys down in North Carolina?
He wasn't paying attention.
It's a good question. To the extent possible, we try and integrate all of the products from the portfolio. Clearly, operating breweries that are breweries and cideries that are licensed in different states creates a bit of a headache to get every product everywhere, distribution aspects to it. So at Victory right now, we've got 4 6 Point beers on tap that were collaborative beers produced in our facility. So to the extent possible, we're trying to expose all of the portfolio products to our customers, because we feel that's a real strength. People want options, and we've put together a group of producers that we feel have some of the best options available.
Now, is a part of your difficulty working with PA because they're unique unto themselves, or is it just in general, just the TTB and getting things approved and all that?
And not Pennsylvania in particular. The fact of the matter is the 21st Amendment gave every state the right to create their own regulations. So trying to harmonize these privileges across different states is really the main problem. So it's not one state in particular.
Right.
We hit a lull.
A lull in the conversation.
No, because I don't want to trash any particular state.
We're
I could go after them.
Well, we had
I wasn't trashing the state. I just, with the Liquor Control Board, I didn't know if that created more issues to bring something from outside in than it is for you to work within Pennsylvania.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, you know, every state is its own unique beast. So one is no better or worse than the other.
Although when one shuts everything down like Pennsylvania did for a while, that was, when you say, you know, you were filling a need, that was important.
Need.
I was very happy during those days to be living on the other side of the Delaware.
Right. Well, and you know, I suspect our officials in Commonwealth of Pennsylvania government recognize. I mean, there's a reason why alcohol beverage manufacturers were identified as essential businesses, because, you know, if people are going to be at home, there was probably a recognition that they needed some comforts to continue, and shutting down the retail was for health aspects, but shutting down people's access was not the plan.
Yeah.
So that's why we were pleased to be able to step up and provide a solution to a problem that no one had really anticipated.
And I'm sure that the homeschool truancy officers, such as myself, were happy in Pennsylvania to be able to, you know, continue to have the medications that they needed in order to have their skills where they were supposed to work.
Medicinal purposes only.
Bingo.
Exactly. No off-label prescriptions at all.
My one sister was lamenting the fact that she had to move from vodka to wine because she could still buy wine at the supermarket, but she couldn't buy any hard spirits because they shut everything down. So her COVID wine intake went up dramatically.
Which is funny, because there's going to be these trends that manufacturers are going to see that are abnormal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're going to be,
boxes.
and they're going to be trying to comp year over year to things that like just made no sense.
Never happen again.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it will, the way we're going. Philly Beer Week. Big loss for Philadelphia. I mean, I was always a huge fan. Of the last few years, we didn't really make it out. How did Philly Beer Week fit in with your marketing strategy? Was it important to you, or was it because you were already so well known, your name in Philly anyway, you didn't really need Philly Beer Week the way maybe some other smaller brewers were, were able to effectively use it? What was Philly Beer Week to you? What is it? And did the fact that, it didn't happen this year have any detrimental effects to you at Victory?
I don't see a downside to us as a company, because everyone's literally in the same boat. Philly Beer Week is a very important part of the history and the connection that we Philadelphia area brewers have with our audience. It's something that has been enjoyed from both sides for a long time. That being said, it was recognized by the founders of Philly Loves Beer, which is the modified form of Philly Beer Week, that, we celebrated 10 days, when the fact of the matter is Philadelphia's embrace of craft beer is year long. So really over the last, I think it's 4 years, we collectively have been, in recognition of that fact, been de-emphasizing the 10 days and being, trying to spread the love across a larger period of time. And that's kind of important, because I think one of the things that if you talk to someone who is a great tap room in Philadelphia, Philly Beer Week didn't intend to do this, but it created competition amongst the retailers for a relatively finite audience. And so the concept of it was never to be competitive, but it became so to a certain extent because everybody had to outdo one another to attract an audience during a limited period of time. So I think it was a very intelligent sort of recognition and relief to move back and say, we can love these beers all year long. Let's not try and, beat each other up and go crazy to do it in one week.
Well,
So
it's funny.
the loss of this for this year, I mean, again, everyone's in the same boat. We, all operators are missing their opportunities to connect.
Well, it's funny because we've.
Go ahead.
Well, we go out to the bars and, you go and everybody's got a constantly revolving tap. So that was kind of we always thought of as a joke. It's like Philly Beer Week is kind of every day. No matter where they go, because there was such an explosion of brew pubs and gastro pubs and all over the city, and they all had like a fantastic lineup.
What I liked about Philly Beer Week is that for a 4-hour window, there's a tap takeover,
right?
And you actually get to talk to someone like you.
Yeah, that was the beauty of it.
Yeah, so you get a little bit more than just the beer. You get a little bit of like the hand holding about why you did what you did and what you were trying to achieve and how you're different from somebody else, and the education piece to it.
Yeah,
I think for me it's great. For other people, maybe they're like, I just want the beer. I don't care about the rest of it.
No,
but to be able to plan my day, to say I want to go here for an hour, I want to go here for an hour, because I don't get a chance to see any of those brewers over the course of the year. Their beer might be there, but I don't get to talk to the brewer or the the rep or whoever's going to be there to talk about the beer, which I think for me that's very interesting.
No, and I appreciate that, Mike, because as you see leading into it, I said, the loss of audience connection is really sort of the thing that is regrettable. We appreciate that opportunity to be connected. Well,
Plus, it gives me a reason to leave work early and go drink, which
that's always a good one. I like that.
Double thumbs up to that
I
one.
like that.
It's not called drinking, Mike. It's research.
Exactly, it's for the blog.
What was that? What did you call it again, Bill? At the brewery, what was that called?
Liquid creativity session.
Liquid creativity.
Bingo.
So we made it past the 2-hour mark, which is, I think, really good, and we've done so in a very enjoyable manner. I bring that point up to say, let's hear what you got and let's wrap it.
Sure. Well, I got to tell you, the 2 beers we tried were really good. For a low cal, I don't want to call it a light beer because it wasn't light on anything except calories. Flavor was there. Everything was great. And the hazy love, I'm a big fan of the summer love to begin with, and that you tweaked it enough so it's different. But they're both really strong beers. Well done.
Yeah, very, very. First of all, thank you. I know it's the pressures on your time, especially these days, have got to be more challenging than normal. So to hang for two hours with a few knuckleheads that think they know more than they really do about craft beer is commendable. Thank you for doing that.
Thanks.
And sorry to be a pest.
I spent years. I read a lot. I try to understand, what brewers are doing and why they're doing it, and it was great to hear your take on, why, for instance, there's a hazy beer in your lineup. It's not just because everyone else is doing it, because you felt there's a place for it in Victory, and it has to be a Victory beer. I think that speaks to the fidelity of what you're trying to do at Victory. And makes a lot of sense. And I now have actually a session IPA that I like. And because I have 4 more of them, and I'm going to enjoy actually drinking them. So this is great. It was really informative. Thanks for doing this. I'll look forward to raising more victories, and whether it's at Philly Beer Week or otherwise, nothing but smooth sailing ahead.
Well, the questions and the camaraderie have been really outstanding, and I appreciate you for hosting me this evening. I just, I figured we could continue to bore people for another half hour, and it wouldn't actually add anything. Yeah,
we're going to Springsteen territory.
Going to Springsteen territory, but I appreciate what you guys are doing because, again, the appreciation of the audience, the knowledge of the audience doesn't only happen from drinking the beer. It's from having forums like this where they can go a little bit deeper and learn a few more things that otherwise wouldn't have happened. So you guys are doing a good job to keep the community educated and promiscuous.
There you go.
For good reasons.
Hey, we're just looking for excuses to drink. I mean, I'm going to be honest here. And to have a couple of laughs, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope you had fun. And, you're welcome to come back at any time. And hopefully very soon we'll see you in person.
Let's, there's no reason we can't be in Downingtown.
Exactly. The words right out of my mouth.
When you're opening the place in Philly, let us know. We'll be more than happy to come.
You mean your second office in Philly?
Yes, my new office when I relocate.
All sounds good. Look forward to that.
Right.
To that beer together.
Cheers.
All right. Thank you.
Bill,
Cheers, Bill.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys. Enjoy the weekend.
All right.
You too.
All right. I'm going to end the broadcast. So thank you to our viewers, however many or few there were. And if you didn't catch it this time, you can catch the replay probably sometime tomorrow. It'll be out there forever. So, okay. Thanks, guys. Cheers. And thank you, Bill.
Cheers. Thanks, Bill.